Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. I am Bryson Carver, as always. And yes, indeed, the NBA playoffs already are in full swing. We had an unbelievable opening weekend. We had a few duds, at the start. That Jazz-Dallas game one especially was unwatchable, especially with Luka not in the game with the Jazz winning. But listen, I'm going to lead the show off with that thriller from yesterday, the Boston Celtics, the Brooklyn Nets, game one, which was won on a buzzer beater by one Jason Tatum. It was an unbelievable execution on that final play. And I'll get to that. I'll get to why I think that is sort of precursors. That is a good representation for what this series is going to be like. As well as sticking with that game, Kyrie Irving was going back and forth with the fans in Boston. You know how critical I've been of Kyrie Irving. I'm Team Kyrie in this situation, and I'll discuss that, as well as, I got to get to my Warriors spanking the Denver Nuggets, starting in the late second quarter and continuing all throughout the rest of the basketball game. I'll discuss that. Is that your MVP, guys? That Jokic guy, is he the MVP? Also, Baker Mayfield. I literally said something about Baker Mayfield on Thursday, and doggone it, if it didn't come back, I almost look like a prophet today. You know me. I'm always here to admit when I'm right and wrong. But Robbie Anderson of the Carolina Panthers made me look like a prophet. And I'll discuss that later in the show, as well as Chris Paul going out, dominating the fourth quarter in last night's Phoenix Suns game one win over the New Orleans Pelicans. But first, how else can I start carving it up live today? Again, great to have you guys in listening or watching to the show. Without starting with the Boston Celtics beating the Brooklyn Nets 115-114 on a buzzer-beating shot by Jason Tatum. Here's the sound, and here's what happened.
Brown the drive. Jaylen Brown kicks it out. Smart fakes. Inside. Tatum spins, and he puts it in. Celtics go up by one.
So we got one of our moments of the playoffs so far. There's no question about that. So Jason Tatum hit a spinning shot to win it at the buzzer on what was a crazy final event. So the Nets are up by a point with about 20 seconds left. Kevin Durant's got the ball, and trust me, I'm going to get to Kevin Durant later in this segment. But Kevin Durant takes a shot at the end of the shot clock, a little bit of an off-balance three, kind of leaning into it. He misses it. Boston grabs the rebound, they push it, and then, you heard Mike Breen, the great Mike Breen on the call there. Jaylen Brown, I'm thinking once he comes back around to the free throw line, I'm like, oh, he's going to try like a fall away, jump shot or something. No, he kicks it out to Smart. Two Nets jump at Smart. I'll think, oh, he's just going to have to throw something up at the rim. No, Marcus Smart, who I've, you know me, I'm not a Marcus Smart fan for what he did to my man Steph a month ago, but he lived up to his last name because he took a dribble, could have taken a shot there, even though it would have been contested in the mid-range. Instead, passed it on the fly to Jason Tatum, who caught the ball, spun, and made a layup at the horn. It was, listen, it's kind of like what I said about the NFL playoffs. Remember that Chargers-Raiders game, the last game of the regular season that was just crazy? And I said, if this is a precursor for the playoffs, we're in for craziness. If that is what we get for the rest of the playoffs, sign me up, because that was phenomenal. But what I think, though, in the bigger picture for this series, that is a perfect representation of what this Boston-Brooklyn series is going to look like. It is going to go 7 games. You see how evenly matched these teams are, right? I mean, if you're a Nets fan today, maybe you feel good because, hey, Kyrie was phenomenal. Kevin Durant was not. The supporting cast was as inconsistent as you could be in the second half, especially. We lost a buzzer beater on the road. So, you could view it that way if you're a Nets fan. But my takeaway is that's how it's going to look. Because, if you're a Lakers fan last year, well, if Anthony Davis had stayed healthy, we'd have beaten Phoenix, and Phoenix got to the finals. Yeah, but Anthony Davis always gets hurt. Brooklyn always loses if one of their 2 superstars doesn't play well. Well, yesterday, Kyrie played great. Kevin Durant did not. Ball game, because the supporting cast ain't all that. Seth Curry scored 9 points out the gate in the first quarter, didn't score after that. Bruce Brown didn't make as big of an impact in this game as he did in the playing game, and this is what I said about Brooklyn. This is exactly what I said about Brooklyn after their playing game, the win over Cleveland last week. I said I was actually a little concerned coming out of that game because Kyrie was awesome, made like his first 12, 13 shots. KD was butter in the fourth quarter, phenomenal. And it was like the outcome still hadn't been decided with about 2 minutes left. I'm like, you gotta run away with that one at home. Like, you just gotta run away. Last night, or really yesterday afternoon, it was kind of an afternoon tip-off. That's what we're going to see. We are going to have games of this series where KD and Kyrie look overwhelming. I would say, because I have Boston in 7, so that means I think Brooklyn's going to get 3 wins in this series. I'd say 1. I'd go so far as to say 2 of the Nets wins that I think they're going to get in this series out of the 3 are going to be blowouts. Whether at home, whether at the Boston Garden, where KD and Kyrie are just unguardable. You can't do anything about them. And they both go off for 30. Maybe one of them goes for 40. And they just kind of put the team on their back. Get everybody else involved. Like, the problem is they have to be great for Brooklyn, to win. I mean, how many teams? I mean, like last night, Devin Booker, he's fine. I think he scored 25. Chris Paul was phenomenal. Boom. That's your game right there. Like, Phoenix played really well, gave that lead up in the fourth quarter, and Chris Paul said, give me the ball, get out of the way, and I'm going to bring us home in game 1. Okay, there you go. The problem in Brooklyn is the 2 stars have to be great, not good, great, in order for them to win. And that's a problem. Like, really, what you assume when you are getting 2 superstar players is that you have the luxury of, if one's off, that's fine, the other one can take us home. Brooklyn doesn't have that luxury, even with 2 superstars, because the supporting cast isn't great. They play no defense. I'm not real sure they're well coached. Love Steve Nash, but I'm not sure if they're well coached. That's the problems Brooklyn's dealing with. Boston, on the other hand, I said this. There's a reason Boston was the 2 seed. There's a reason Brooklyn was the 7 seed. I fell for this last year with the Lakers and the Suns, and I said I'm not falling for it again. There's a reason the Suns were the 2 seed last year, and, they got to the finals. And the reason the Lakers were the 7 seed, they got bounced in the first round. So that's what it comes down to. And what you also saw too, and let me transition to KD. I'll get to the Kyrie Boston fans thing in a second. But with Kevin Durant, it seems to me, I'm not sure if it's because his game is beautiful to watch, and it is. I don't know if it's that. Maybe the media is terrified of KD going off on them on Twitter or something, because he's been known to do that. I'm not sure. But Kevin Durant seems like he's the only NBA superstar exempt from criticism if he plays bad. Which by KD standards, not by an NBA player, you're like, it's inefficient, but he scored 21. No, by Kevin Durant standards, the guy who I think is the 3rd best player on earth, the guy some people think is the best player on earth, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. Okay? Kevin Durant yesterday, right? 23 points, 9 for 24 from the field, 1 for 5 from 3, only 4 rebounds and 3 assists. And by the way, he let Jason Tatum beat him on that back cut on that buzzer beater. Kevin Durant's, he's asleep on defense. He's got his back to Tatum. Tatum goes right by him, and he catches Smart's pass up and goes up for the game-winning layup. So KD, and by the way, before that, missed a shot that could have iced the game. Like, Brooklyn's up 1. If he hits that 3, they're up 4 with 10 seconds left. That baby's a wrap. And then in the late game, he falls asleep on defense, and it costs the Nets the game. If LeBron James does that, we'd have never heard the end of it. If Steph had done that, maybe not Steph defensively, because Steph's a decent defender. He's not a great defender by any means. Kevin Durant's a better defender than Steph. But if Steph, at the very least, missed the shot that would have put the game away and had an inefficient game the way he did, the way that Kevin Durant did, we'd be like, come on, Steph. Like, man, you're the greatest shooter ever. You got to make that shot. You missed that shot in Game 6 against the Raptors 3 years ago. Like, man, you got to hit that step. If Kawhi does that, man, I told you Kawhi wasn't no leader like that. That's the problem. He don't lead the team, and there's no chemistry and load management. If it was Giannis, I told you he wasn't the best player in the world. He can't shoot. That's why the Bucks lost. If Kyrie, oh, come on, Kyrie. This is, you know, Kevin Durant carried you. Kevin Durant does it, and where's the criticism? Love KD, right? He played for my Warriors for 3 years, delivered 2 championships. Always love him for that. I was a KD fan before he's a Warrior. I've religiously said on the show, the most gifted scorer I've ever seen, and I think in the history of the game of basketball. That's how great he is. So when he has games like this, my criticism is more than fair. Especially when KD, your guy Kyrie, went out there and balled. You got to finish the deal. Not just specifically that last shot, but throughout the game. I mean, he's missing these easy mid-ranges. It's like, what's up? And listen, every player gets a bad game. I understand that. But what I want from the media, and even in some cases, not all, but some cases by the fans, just be consistent. Keep the same energy for certain players that you keep with others. Kevin Durant is a superstar. Nobody disputes that. Give him superstar praise when he plays well. Give him superstar criticism when he doesn't. That's all I'm saying. He's phenomenal. Wasn't yesterday. I would put him at the top of the blame list for the Nets. Without a question. He's the best player on the team. Didn't play well. He deserves the blame. He certainly deserves blame on that last play, if anything, for letting Tatum go by him. So that's my take on KD. Like, we've got to stop being so selective on which superstars we criticize and which ones we don't. I mean, seriously, can you imagine if that had happened to LeBron? If LeBron goes 9 for 24, 1 for 5 from 3, misses the dagger shot, and then 12 seconds later gives up the buzzer beater. Oh my gosh. We'd have never heard the end of it. Just be consistent. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. We just keep it real. That's what we do on Carving It Up. But staying with that game, so we talked about Boston, phenomenal chemistry, great ball movement on that last play, great defense, down the stretch and coming back. They gave up the lead, and then they came back and beat the Nets. I believe they were down 5, as many as 5 in the fourth quarter. They come back and win the game. So, I mean, that's why I Boston the series. But transitioning now to what has appeared to be, at least from what I've seen, which is crazy for in a game, at a playoff game that ended in a buzzer beater, that the Kyrie Boston fans situation. Before I get into that, got a comment from John. He's got the finger. He's not the middle finger. He's got the ring finger. No, we're not going to show we're not going to show the images of Kyrie. So John, no middle fingers. Nobody in the comments. No middle fingers. I want to keep it family friendly on the show. But in all seriousness, so I counted 3 times, maybe it was 2, of Kyrie Irving flipping off Boston fans. So the first one was where he's in the corner. He hits, I think it was Tatum was guarding him. It might have been Brown. I forgot who it was, but he hits him with a jab step, a mean jab step, hits a long 2, rips it, nothing but net. And he turns around and he gives the Boston fans the bird. And then later on, when he's on the sideline, the ref's about to hand him the ball. He's about to throw the ball in bounds. Boston fans behind him are saying something, and then he goes behind his head and gives them the bird. And there's plenty of social media videos on the angle right behind Kyrie Irving where you can see the gesture. Certainly, he's going to get fined. And I think even at halftime, he's a Boston fan yelled something like, "Kyrie, you suck," and he said he said something in return, so he probably is going to get fined for that. Anytime that the NBA has seen, and social media has been the biggest, the biggest culprit for this. Like, we seen KD, he says something to fans, and Kevin Durant has been fined $20K for his profanity against fans in Phoenix. Like that's how it goes. So I'm not disputing that. Like I get Kyrie, pushing back. You just, rules are the rules. But I will say this, because me, I've been as critical of Kyrie as anybody. I'm totally on his side on this one. It's nothing against it's not necessarily because there's been plenty of times, let's be real now, especially throughout sports history, throughout NBA history, certainly, baseball and football. There's plenty of times where we could criticize Boston fans for going over the edge into racial territory. I mean, just ask Bill Russell. I mean, the things they said to him were just gross. So I don't know if there was any racial slurs or anything of that nature hurled towards Kyrie. The indication by Kyrie himself and by people around was that there wasn't. So hopefully that continues. There's no racist anything. But Kyrie, after the game, he was asked about the interactions between he and the Boston fans. He said, quote, "And it's not every fan. I don't want to attack every fan, every Boston fan. When people start yelling, keep it clean, blank or blank you and all this stuff, there's only but so much you take as a competitor. We're the ones expected to be docile and humble, take a humble approach. Blank that. It's the playoffs. This is what it is. I know what to expect in here, and it's the same energy I'm giving back to them. It is what it is. I'm not really focused on it. It's fun. You know what I'm saying?" So Kyrie, in a sense, is saying, I'm not going to take this. And he even had a quote in that press conference after the game, something about, if you want to go, let's go. Like, Kyrie's not going to fight a fan. A fan's not going to fight Kyrie. It's not going to happen. But I will say, for two reasons, I'm on Kyrie's side, because me, anytime that there is anything inappropriate said towards a player, like if it's just, hey, Giannis, you suck, that's just part of it. That's just part of the experience. But I will say this, and we've seen on social media, especially now more in recent years, the things that as Kyrie himself said, some fans have said towards superstar basketball players, it's like there's a line. Like everybody, remember November, I think it was the day before Thanksgiving. LeBron had that big game in Indiana, and he walked over to those courtside fans, told the ref what they had said, and they had them removed from the game. And it turns out that people around the fans who got thrown out of the game, who LeBron got thrown out of the game, were saying things about Bronny. And it's like, once you go after a man's family, once you go after, things of that nature, like you can't go there. You cannot step into that territory. You can't. And so I don't know if they stepped into that, over that line, based on what Kyrie says. Sounds like they were just calling him certain names, certain inappropriate names. But I'm on Kyrie's side for two reasons. Number one, you can't just go up and say anything to anybody, right? I mean, you can't do that. There's got to be a certain level of respect brought to the arena, quote unquote. No pun intended, because it was literally an arena. There's got to be some level of respect that you do bring to the competition. Because as a fan, yes, you do have your own small impact on the game, and that, we talk about home court advantage all the time. Boston's got a great home court advantage, right? The TD Garden, man, it gets rocking in these big playoff games. But there's a certain line you can't cross. Now, do I defend Kyrie like flipping him off? I wouldn't have. I mean, of course, who am I to say if I were in Kyrie's position and having certain things said about me? I mean, he should get fined by the NBA just because they're going to fine anybody if they do that. So, you can't leave, you can't leave your best players out of that. But the second reason I'm on Kyrie's side is that the one thing I liked about what he did is he's going after the Boston fans. They're going back and forth, and Kyrie balled out. If anything, maybe the fans kind of gave Kyrie an extra edge, because we know there's already an intensity that comes with the NBA playoffs, with any playoffs in any sport, but the NBA playoffs certainly is included in that. And I think the fans, more than anything, fired him up. We know the history. He was in Boston for 2 years. He said before his last season in Boston, because it was obviously his last year of his contract, and he said they had some like open practice or something, and all the fans were invited, and he had the mic in his hand. He said, if you guys would like to have me back, then I'm coming back. I'm going to sign a long-term deal in Boston. And, the fans are cheering and all that. And turns out he ended up leaving for Brooklyn in free agency the following summer. So there's some bad blood there. I get that. I understand that aspect of it. But again, there's a certain line you can't cross. But I've always said, if you are going to talk smack, if you're going to say certain things, if you are going to, make certain statements, which Kyrie did toward the Boston fans, the flipping off and the fake crying. I know he did like the crying eyes and stuff like that, making fun of them. You back it up, I got nothing to say. I've always been consistent on this on my show. If you're going to talk and you back it up, Can't say anything. And Kyrie backed it up. Like, you heard me criticize KD. KD's the best player on the team. You got to be better. Kyrie held up his end of the bargain. And I think the fans fired up Kyrie up into going, 12 for 20, 6 for 10 from 3, 39 points to go on with 6 or 6 and 5 rebounds. Like, an efficient 39 too. Like, he hit that 3 with under a minute left. I'm thinking that's the dagger. Like, that's going to, that wins it for Brooklyn. Turns out it didn't, of course. We saw what happened in the last 35, 40 seconds of the basketball game. But I will say, I do hope the fan activity doesn't get as bad as it did. Remember the last year, early in the playoffs, a fan dumped popcorn on Russell Westbrook. A Boston fan threw, it was, when the Nets played the Celtics last year, a Boston fan threw a water bottle that nearly hit Kyrie in the eye. And there were other things that happened. I think there were some fans around the court doing stupid stuff. So hopefully in Minnesota, by the way, you got fans chaining themselves to the backboard. You've got, you had that one fan who glued herself to the court. It's like, what's going on? Like some people, man, just don't know how to control themselves. Some people just don't know how to handle themselves in public. I don't know what it is. But it's like Katie. I remember Katie said, I think it was a year ago. He said, look, this isn't a zoo. We're not animals. We're people just like you. If you want to boo us, fine. If you want to say we suck and if you want to insult our games and stuff like that, great. Matter of fact, it actually fires us up. We kind of like it. You can't go over the line. Can't be saying stuff about, their families and calling them certain names. Like, you can't do that because you know why? You never do it. First of all, it's the wrong thing to do, obviously. And secondly, ain't no way a fan's going to walk up to Kyrie Irving and say the things that Kyrie said that they said. There ain't no way a person's going to walk up to Russell Westbrook with popcorn in their hands and dump it on him. Like, you never do it. But it does come from, and again, it's not all fans, obviously. There's idiots that ruin everything. In any field, not just watching sports, but in any field. But I don't know. There's just a segment of people apparently that think that because they paid to buy tickets, especially if they get tickets close to the court or things of that nature, that they could just do whatever they want. It's like, no, you either somebody invited you or you paid your hard-earned money to go see a basketball game. Awesome, good for you. That gives you the right to sit there and take in the action, watch the game. That doesn't give you, the right to say certain things to athletes. Because you wouldn't say that to them if you saw them in the street. You'd ask for a selfie and an autograph, right? It's the same thing of these Twitter trolls, as they call them, out here talking mess, and it's like, man, you never say that to that person in person. We know that, but some people just they're cowards. But no, I'm on Kyrie's side on this one, without a question. He's got every right to be pissed off. Now, do I defend him flipping off the fans? I guess I can't go there, but then again, can you blame a guy for defending himself? It's not like he's out here swinging against the malice at the palace. And even that, it did go a touch too far to say the very least, but I defend Ron Artest and Steven Jackson defending themselves because that's what any of us would do as a human being. But it's a great basketball game yesterday, without a question. All kinds of drama. And if that's game one, just imagine how this series is going to play out, especially if it gets to a game 7. Like, it's like what I said on Friday's show. I can't remember a first-round series in which two teams we could actually see getting to the NBA Finals in the first round, especially a 2 seed versus a 7 seed. The 2 seed, we're like, yeah, of course, plenty of 2 seeds that won the championship. I think the lowest seed to ever win a championship was like the 6 seed. I think the Houston Rockets did it. Was it 1995? Excuse me. I think it was 1995. The Rockets did it. They were the 6th seed in the Western Conference, and they went on to win the championship. I think the lowest seed to ever get to the finals was the Knicks. They were the 8th seed. They were at the bottom. They were the 8th seed in 1999, the lockout shortened year, and they got to the finals and lost to the Spurs. But yeah, it doesn't happen often where we see two teams, a high seed and a low seed, but we could see both, going out there and winning the championship in a couple months. That's the beauty of the NBA. And that's the thing about the East. Like, I feel like people are giving the West more credit than it deserves. And I'm a fan of a Western Conference team, but the East to me is far better than the West. It used to be the other way around. I used to call it the Bestern Conference and the Leastern Conference. It's flipped. It's really the Beastern Conference now, if you think about it, because you got Milwaukee and Brooklyn and Boston and Miami and Philly. That's 5. I'm not as high on Philly as a lot of people, but certainly those top 4 are definitely contenders. And then out West, I'm sorry, it's a 2-team race. It's Phoenix and it's Golden State. I'm going to get it to my Warriors in just a second. I had Dallas in that mix, but now that Luka's out, their goose is cooked. Luka's not going to play tonight in game 2. Jazz should win this game. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, if they lose any game that Luka Doncic does not play, Donovan Mitchell needs to pack his bags after the series is over and get out of Salt Lake City. It's nothing against the city. It's a great city, and the Jazz are a great organization, but just can't get over the top. You got to win this game tonight for the Jazz. We got 3 playoff games tonight, too. 3 playoff games. The first one is Raptors Sixers. That game tips off in about an hour on TNT. On NBA TV, 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, you got the Jazz and Mavericks, as I just mentioned. That's on NBA TV. And then the second game of the doubleheader on TNT, Nuggets Warriors game 2. That game tips off at about 7 o'clock Pacific time, 10 o'clock Eastern time. Speaking of that series, speaking of my Golden State Warriors, people seem to be really surprised at that game 1 win. Like, most people, it seemed like the consensus was Warriors in 6. Like, everybody agrees, yes, the Warriors are better than the Nuggets, especially with the Nuggets dealing with the injuries to Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. Like, they're beat up. We get that. Like, Golden State's a better team. I said I would take Golden State in 5 without Steph. If Steph didn't play a dribble, I'd still take the Warriors in 5 games. If Steph played, I'd take a sweep. I said, I think I was the only one of anyone that I've seen that said Golden State is going to sweep this series. After game 1, that's sure looking good, because that game was kind of nip and tuck, back and forth. Neither team could really pull away from the other. And then the Golden State Warriors went to their death lineup. Yes, it is a death lineup 3.0. The first death lineup was the Splash Brothers, Draymond, Iguodala, Harrison Barnes. The death lineup 2 years after that, death lineup 2.0, was the Splash Brothers, Draymond, Iguodala, and this guy named Kevin Durant. Maybe you've heard of him. And then this go round, it's the Splash Brothers, Draymond, Andrew Wiggins, and Jordan Poole, who was the best player on the floor on Saturday night. Phenomenal. The 3rd most points ever scored by a Warrior in their playoff debut. I think first was Wilt with 35, and it's a motto on Carving It Up. If your numbers in any way, shape, or form are comparable to Wilt, you're doing something right. Because that dude was just, he was on another level. But Jordan Poole on Saturday night, 30 points, 9 for 13 for the field, 5 for 7 from 3-point range. Like I said, he was the leading scorer in the game. Best player on the floor, or played better than anybody on the floor, certainly in that game. And Jordan Poole's been on fire in general. How he isn't in the running for most improved player, how he didn't finish as a finalist, I can't even explain it. I can't even explain it. I really can't. I mean, Darius Garland should be in that top 3. Without a question. Darius Garland had a great year. DeJounte Murray, I would go with Tyrese Maxey, because I already looked at DeJounte Murray as like, this is a really good NBA player, like a fringe all-star. I feel like Tyrese Maxey took a bigger jump than DeJounte Murray. How Ja Morant is in the running for most improved player makes no sense, because we knew Ja Morant was great. We knew he was a guy who someday might be an MVP. We know how great Ja Morant is. Jordan Poole went from like 12 points a game to 19. He went from really good role player to, oh snap, like he like was the best player on the Warriors with Steph Curry out when Steph missed the last month. Certainly in that stretch he was. So, but again, I will warn the rest of NBA fans. Certainly if you're in the Western Conference. If you're a fan of a Western Conference team that is not the Phoenix Suns, you had a good season. You ain't competing with our guys if we're healthy. Simple as that. I said on the show back in October, I've said it, I maintained it throughout the season. the one team in the West, there's plenty in the East, but the one team in the West that can truly challenge Golden State is Phoenix. Let me give you the stat about my Warriors. In the series that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green have started every game in the series. So every playoff series that they have played in which they started every game, they've never lost. Never. Now, Steph didn't start, of course, on Saturday night. He came off the bench. Will he tonight? That's remains to be seen. I would think he's probably going to start. My guess is Steve Kerr's probably going to go with the Splash Brothers, Poole, because why? I mean, it's kind of hard to take Jordan Poole out of your rhythm right now. Like, I feel like you're almost kind of trapped. Like, you have to start Jordan Poole. Obviously, you're going to start Draymond. And I almost think you bring Wiggins off the bench. I would. Because I want Looney in there using up his fouls so Draymond can guard Jokic later in the game. That's another story for another day. But the bottom line to all this is, when you've got a well-run organization, which the Warriors are, with great ownership, a great GM, great coach, great roster, and the most selfless superstar maybe in professional sports outside of Tom Brady, this is what you get. I don't think the Warriors get enough credit for how good they've been at developing young players. Because oftentimes we think of the Warriors as, this dynastic team that just put all these guys together and created this super team. Like, we're still almost psychologically, it seems like we're still kind of stuck in the KD years. Because KD was like the one guy they brought over, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is not even fair. Obviously, they brought in Iguodala in free agency back in 2013. Steph was drafted and developed. Klay was drafted and developed. By the way, of the major contributors on the Warriors, like the main core guys, Steph was the highest drafted, and he was drafted 7th. Klay Thompson was drafted 11th. Draymond was taken the 2nd round. Jordan Poole was taken 28th. Jordan Poole 2 years ago shot sub 40%. This year, we're like, can the Warriors win a championship without Jordan Poole? That's just in a 2-year stretch. That's the impact that Poole has had on this basketball team. So I'm just here to tell you, they're going to sweep the Denver Nuggets, which, the MVP, quote unquote, is going to get swept for a 2nd straight year. But, I heard he's, more valuable than any player in the league. Even Giannis, even Embiid and Steph and KD. Okay. All right. Back-to-back sweeps. That sure looks good, your resume. They're going to sweep Denver. They're going to beat Memphis. Memphis is going to beat Minnesota. I think I said that was going to go 6 games. I said the home team would win every game, and then Memphis would go to Minnesota and close them out in game 6. I mean, that's feeling like more of a 7-gamer now to me because of how Minnesota played. It seemed like they kind of caught Memphis off guard. But I still think Memphis is going to win that series, and Golden State's going to win in 5 games. Memphis is too young. It's not their time yet. It's going to be their time. Great young core, great coach, superstar. They're going to be here for a while. Just not yet. I feel almost like offended in a way that people seem so surprised at the Warriors playing the way they did, like really being the most impressive team over the weekend. It's like, well, I mean, have you been watching? Klay Thompson did end the regular season with 3 straight games of scoring over 30 points. That's something he's never done in his career. Draymond Green kind of has looked like the guy who was the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year before he got hurt in January. Like, he's playing well. Poole, I already mentioned him. He's playing well. Steph's just trying to get his legs back underneath him. I mean, Steph was like, in terms of his terms of shooting, in terms of scoring the basketball, he was like a non-factor. It didn't matter. I'm just saying, though, about y'all's MVP, because I'm sure not everybody listening thinks Jokic is the MVP, but just y'all who think people act like I don't like Jokic. Like there was some folks commenting on a couple shows ago talking about, oh, you hate Jokic, you don't know basketball. I'm like, I like Jokic. I mean, for what I've seen, I don't know much about him personally. He seems like a moderately nice guy. He's kind of quiet. That's fine. And I think he's one of the 10 best basketball players on the planet. I think he's a great player. Had a great season. I'm mad at the people. I'm offended by the people who think that he's the most valuable player. Because to me, it's a two-man race. It's Giannis or it's Embiid. I think I would vote for Giannis, but if it's Embiid, I'm not going to complain. I've got no problem with that at all. But Jokic, through his supporters in the media, is probably about to commit highway robbery twice. Because the media robbed Steph or Chris Paul, because to me, those are the top two for MVP last year. They robbed Steph of MVP last year, and they're probably about to rob either Giannis or Embiid this year. But okay. He's out there getting absolutely smoked. All right. MVPs at least put up a fight in the series, in the game. But no, I could not feel better as a Warriors fan. As long, knock on wood, as long as we're healthy, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. There's nothing to worry about. Because Steph's going to get his legs back underneath him over the course of the series. What I think is going to be a very quick series. I think 6 days from now, we'll be talking about who the Warriors will play in the second round. But Draymond's playing awesome. So is Clay, and so is Jordan Poole. Even the role guys, like I thought Gary Payton played well. Wiggins was good offensively, especially and defensively. Looney was good against Jokic. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. Like I said, when I did my playoff weaknesses, my thing for the Warriors is health. If they're healthy, they're going to win the championship. They're going to win the championship. Been saying that since last summer. I'm absolutely sticking by that. I have not moved an inch off my Warriors over Milwaukee in the finals. Although I will say, Milwaukee didn't look overly impressive yesterday against Chicago. I picked that series also as a sweep. I had the two teams who I think is going to get to the finals. I had them both sweeping their first round series. Look, in the playoffs, you take anyone you could get, obviously. You're not going to nitpick as much as you would like in a 5-game span in the regular season. It's kind of an ugly basketball game. I mean, credit to the Bulls, they competed, but DeMar DeRozan, man, you got to be better. John, he's going out on a limb. He says I got the Lakers to win the championship. He says sorry, podcast audience, he's joking. He says, LOL, just kidding. Yeah. They have some work to do, but I ain't going. We got a rule in carving up. Unless something genuinely major happens with the Los Angeles Lakers, we're not talking about them on the show. Okay, they couldn't even make the play-in tournament. They don't deserve our time. They fired their coach. When they hire a new one, I'll talk about him. If they sign a key player or when they trade Westbrook, I'll talk about it. But until then, no talk about the team from LA. By the way, speaking of California, the Warriors are going to have to carry California again. Again. Neither of the two LA teams made it, and Sacramento didn't make it. It's like, geez, thanks. But hey, that's what the Warriors do. They represent the Bay Area. But again, before I get into the Baker Mayfield topic, because I want to hit that head on, just sort of an overview. I feel like back in the NFL season again. Like NFL season, the next Monday, I talk about some of the key games, and then I go an overview of all the games. So over the weekend, you had the Jazz beating Dallas. They were supposed to beat Dallas. You cannot. I don't care if it's on the road. You cannot lose with Luka out. You can't. Same thing tonight. If you're the Jazz, you cannot lose this game tonight. Because obviously, going into the series, not having home court advantage, mathematically you have to win at least one road game. If you can take two, take advantage of the fact that Luka is out, you got to jump at that. You got to jump at that if you're the Utah Jazz. There we go. But Donovan Mitchell only scored 2 points in the first half, was just really off. But in the second half, Donovan went off, scoring 30. It was an inefficient 30, but it was 32 points is 32 points. And obviously the Jazz closed out the game with some good free throw shooting there at the end of some good defense. But they took care of business. They were supposed to with Luka Doncic out of the game. Yeah, and yet that Timberwolves-Grizzlies game, which this is going to be a fun series because you've got two teams full of kids, basically. I mean, like I said, coming in, I picked Memphis to win the series in 6. But you look at the Timberwolves, the only veteran on the team with like a long span of playoff experiences is Patrick Beverley. And then for the Grizzlies, the only guy with like a long playoff history is Steven Adams. That's it. I mean, obviously there are guys on both teams that have been to the playoffs, but it isn't like they've been in big series after big series. Like, this is new to them. So the fact that we get John Morant versus Anthony Edwards, the fact that we get Jaren Jackson Jr. versus Karl Anthony Towns, who, hats off to him, Cat showed up. I was really hard on Cat after he didn't play well against the Clippers. Karl Anthony Towns showed up on Saturday afternoon. Like, shouts to him. But the Timberwolves won the game 113-117. It's crazy. Memphis is the thing about Memphis. And I said going into the season, I love the direction they're going. Love them. But there almost is a little sort of, I don't want to go so far as to say arrogance, but I will say a sort of attitude like we've already done this before. Like we've already won in a long run before. So, we're just going to do it again. It's like, Memphis, you have yet to win a playoff series since 2015. Like, because you know me, like just like I said with Kyrie Irving, if you're going to talk all that, back it up. Well, Memphis, you're going to have to back this up because you cannot lose at home and then be down 2-0 to an equally young team going on the road for games 3 and 4. And Minnesota is good at home. I mean, they're a different team at home. So for them to steal this game in Memphis was huge for them. I love that moment, though, after when the game was winding down with about a minute left. Did you guys see John Morant's dad and Karl Anthony Towns' dad, hugging it out like on the sideline? This is as the game is going. I think it was like during free throws, but the game is not over. It's like, this is like AAU days. Like, this is dope. Like, two dads supporting their NBA players, hugging it out. It's like, I love this. This is awesome. I thought that was the coolest moment of the weekend for sure. And then obviously I already discussed, or Philadelphia and Toronto. Philadelphia might win this series in a gentleman's sweep. I had Toronto pushing them 6. Now, obviously, we got to see how the Raptors look and how particularly James Harden looks for Philadelphia once the series does shift back to Toronto. But Scotty Barnes is out. Thad Young is out. Like, Toronto's just falling apart. Maybe they take a game off of Philadelphia in Toronto, especially the fact that Philadelphia won't have Matisse Thybulle because he's unvaccinated and can't go into Canada. But I don't know. Like, I'm not as high on Toronto now. I know it's just one game, but because of their health, because of how Philadelphia looked in game 1, I can't. I had this series ending in 6. I can't see it going more than 5 now. I really can't. Because I thought this was going to be one of the more intriguing first-round matchups, but unless Toronto gets healthy fast, I can't see that happening. And then to Sunday, Miami smacked Atlanta. A credit to Atlanta going on the road. I said they would beat Cleveland in a close one. And Trae Young, Ice Trae, man, he was on fire. But he was Ice Trae again on Sunday. Except in that regard, he was Ice Trae because he was cold. He couldn't throw it in the ocean. Miami was just swarming him. Trae scored 8 points, 1 for 12 for the field, 0 for 7 for 3. Like, he was bad. And his teammates weren't much better. For Miami, the best player on the floor was Duncan Robinson. 27 points, 9 for 10 from the field, 8 for 9 from 3. Not bad, shooting 90% from the field. Not bad. Coming off the bench as well. Jimmy Butler was good, 21 points. I still think, I feel like, and I said this when the whole Eric Spoelstra, Jimmy Butler feud thing happened. I said, I think people are taking this too seriously for 2 reasons. Jimmy Butler is always like that. He about that smoke, right? He's always argued with coaches. He's argued with teammates. That's who he is. And 2, I feel like this is going to bring them closer. And since that, Miami has just been on fire. The Heat have been on fire, if you will. And I had them regardless of who won the Cleveland and Atlanta playing game. I had Miami winning 5 games, and they're just a better basketball team than Atlanta. Atlanta has the best player in the series, Trae Young. Miami has the better basketball team, and it's not even close. They're better defensively. They move the ball better. As much as I like Nate McMillan, Eric Spoelstra is one of the 5 best coaches in basketball. So, and they got home court. They're going to take care of the series pretty quickly in 5 games. Obviously, I talked about Nets, Celtics, Bucks, Bulls. I touched on it for a second. Kind of an ugly win for the Milwaukee Bucks. Like, I kind of expected more out of them. I think it was 93-86. Yeah, 93-86. Chicago, the Milwaukee was aided by the fact that Chicago couldn't throw it in the ocean. Zach LaVine was inefficient. DeMar DeRozan was inefficient. And now the Bulls are 0-5 against the Bucks. Like, this is why I think it's going to be a sweep. And then the last game, which I'll touch on later, Pelicans and Suns, I think was a pretty interesting basketball game, especially in the fourth quarter until one Chris Paul took over. But I'll discuss that in just a second. But we got to talk about Baker Mayfield. It's not anything he said or he did this time. Obviously, I discussed the podcast interview on Thursday. More on that in just a second. Well, you know what? Let me just go ahead and dive into that. So, on Thursday's show, and I think John commented, I give him the shout out for setting me up really well. John commented about something about how the Jets. I was talking about Sam Darnold, and this is why Sam Darnold is more respected than the Baker Mayfield, even though Baker's a better quarterback. And I was talking about the Jets. They didn't something about they weren't trying to trade Sam Darnold, and John commented, "Hey, trust me, they were trying to trade Sam Darnold." It's like, well, you're probably right, but this was kind of my point about why I said this on Thursday. This was on Thursday. Teammates like Sam Darnold. He wets the bed a lot, but his teammates, for whatever reason, like him. He's a likable guy, and I explained that on the show on Thursday. If I can pull up the clip right here. Let's see. The clip from Thursday's show where I was discussing Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. Okay, here it is. Here we go. Yeah, I mean, like I said, they're both busts. But that's the difference between Sam and Baker. Like, if Sam Darnold's on the market, you're not going to have a ton of suitors, clearly, after how he's played since coming into the league. But the one thing about Sam that they can get that they can get from Sam that they can't get from Baker, they can trust how he handles himself. That was my point, is that you can trust how Sam carries himself. What do you know? Panthers Daily, I believe is the Instagram account, put out a post talking about how the Panthers would at least consider going after one Baker Mayfield. So here's the post. Sorry for the podcast audience. Here it is. Panthers Way. I'm sorry. Panthers Way is the Instagram account. Here's the post. It says, per Ian Rappaport, the most likely landing spot for Baker Mayfield is the Carolina Panthers. And you see that the account right there at the bottom, Chosen One RA, I guess is the Chosen One. Robbie Anderson, I guess is what the RA stands for. And he commented one very simple but very telling word. No. Bleacher Report basically put out a post of their own saying what Robbie Anderson commented, that no comment. Here's what Bleacher Report said. This says, Robbie Anderson does not want Baker Mayfield to come to Carolina. Robbie Anderson commented on that post, quote, facts. I literally said this on Thursday. Like, Baker is better than Sam Darnold. Nobody disputes that. But he's a headache. I mean, when the whole Odell situation went down, they let go of Odell. Guys were like, the reports were coming out that the Browns locker room, at least half the locker room was on Odell's side. Like, hey man, I'm sorry that you had to deal with this dude. Like, go kick butt in Los Angeles. And of course, Odell did, and he's fitting himself right now as we speak for a Super Bowl ring, where Baker Mayfield currently doesn't have a job in the NFL. And Sam Darnold does. Why? Darn sure isn't because of his talent. It darn sure isn't because of his decision-making. Sam Darnold takes the cake for the most head-scratching interceptions of anybody in the league. He throws something like, what are you doing? He takes the cake even from Carson Wentz. Like, he's that bad. But trust matters with a franchise quarterback. More than any other position, not just in football, but in sports. And is it fair? Probably not. Because we're not, when a linebacker, a middle linebacker, or a right guard is coming into the league, We talk about if they have maybe some off the field issues or stuff like that, and it may hurt them a little bit in getting drafted, but we're not like, gosh, I'm not sure if you can draft him unless the situation off the field is like really, really bad, like really bad. We're for the most part like, God, he's talented. You got to take him. You got to go after him. With quarterbacks, it's a different story. This is why Johnny Manziel didn't work. He was all in the money signs and the Johnny football and all that nonsense. After 2 years, he's out of the league. And from what I know, it seems like he's doing okay in terms of his sobriety. But like maturity matters for being a starting quarterback. Like I said, is it fair? No. But too much is given, much is required. John John says technically he does have a job and a $20 million plus guaranteed. I'm saying, John, that there is not a team currently that is committed to him. That was poor wording on my part. There's not a team right now that's committed to Baker. Cleveland's not committed to him. That's why they went out and got Deshaun. You know, reports are that Seattle has moved on. They're going to go with Drew Lock. You know, Carolina maybe, but I mean, is Baker's better than Sam, like I said, but is it like there's just this massive upgrade that's going to get Carolina to the playoffs? No, it's not. But you know, like you said, John, to Baker's credit, he's gotten that money before he skedaddle out of Cleveland. Whenever he does skedaddle out of Cleveland via trade or via free agency. Only team I've heard like even moderately interested in Baker is like Pittsburgh, which even that doesn't make a ton of sense. Like Trubisky, Baker, we can make an argument about who's better and who's not. My argument for Trubisky, and I'm not a big Mitch Trubisky fan. I wasn't out of the draft in 2017, but the one thing I will give Mitch Trubisky, the guy was in the same division as Aaron Rodgers for 4 years. He got to the playoffs twice. Like, I'll give him that. Baker's been once. John Johnson's sources say Carolina. Yeah, and that's, like I said, that's what, and I put the post up there. Like, that's seems to be reports. Ian Rappaport has put it out there that it's Carolina seemed like the most likely destination. At least I would think, you know, via trade would be the most likely destination. But my question for Carolina is just like, why? Like, do you think he's going to drastically improve your team that much? Because if not, why would you give up draft picks and things of that nature for him? Excuse me. John just says QB class is not that good this year, so they might take a flyer. They might, but in that case, I would just go with Darnold then. Because at the very least, knows the offense. You get no drama with Sam Darnold. Carolina already doesn't have expectations to do anything this year. So, I mean, how many rumors have we seen over the last year of, you know, sources say, you know, remember when Deshaun Watson was still in the market? You know, the Panthers were going to have to give up Christian McCaffrey probably to go get Deshaun Watson. Ultimately, of course, the Browns got him. But, you know, Carolina's in a complete rebuild. So I don't see the point in, if you're going to take a flyer, if you're going to go with a bridge quarterback, why him? Why that bridge quarterback? But that's my opinion. He's more drama. He's more, you know, nonsense than I think he's worth, without a question. But it will be interesting. I mean, does anything happen during, you know, draft weekend, which, by the way, the NFL draft is a week from Thursday. So, you know, hopefully looking to try and get set up on carving up an NFL draft live show. And so, you know, be sure to stay tuned for more information on that. But it's an interesting draft this year because what you have is a lot of defensive players. It's a really good and underrated, in my opinion, a really good receiver draft. You have two guys coming out of Ohio State. You've got now Jamison Williams out of Alabama. Is he healthy? Obviously, he tore his ACL in that national title game against Georgia. You know, is he ready to go? And like you said, John's on the comments, like the quarterback draft isn't great. It's really two guys. It's Malik Willis and it's Kenny Pickett. A lot of scouts like Matt Corral, kid out of Ole Miss. You know, he had a good college career. You know, there's that Desmond Ridder, is that the kid's name, from Cincinnati. A lot of scouts like him. So, you know, there's some interesting quarterbacks. I think more like mid-second round level in terms of their talent. The quarterback class is nowhere near that of last year. I mean, you're talking Trevor Lawrence. You're talking, I still love Trey Lance. You're talking, gosh, who am I missing? But yeah, you had that Mac Jones guy that I'm not that high on. Who else was that? I'm blanking on who else was in the court. Justin Fields. That's who it was. Justin Fields. Like, we're talking guys who could be like, who have the talent to be franchise superstar quarterbacks in this league. I'm not sure I like Malik Willis. I'm not as high on Kenny Pickett. That's really it. Like, I guess my comp for Malik Willis would be Josh Allen. Now, I don't think he's going to be as good as Josh Allen, but you're talking he's a big-bodied quarterback, massive arm. We saw that at the combine. So, that works certainly in the NFL. John says, yeah, here's Cincinnati quarterback moving up. Might be the shocker this year. Maybe, and we see that often with players who, like, in the last week leading up to the draft, they just fly up these mock draft, these boards, and these teams are really interested and more intrigued in these scouts. Like, that's what's great about the draft. Like, we all kind of know who the number one pick is going to be. That Hutchinson guy out of Michigan, the edge rusher. Like him, don't love him. I don't think he's the level of like a Chase Young or somebody. But I think he could be a productive player in this league. I've heard some guys compare him to Hubbard from the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm like, okay, if he can be that, then he could be a very productive player in this league. But again, it's not a superstar-ridden draft, but it's whoever wins the Super Bowl or whoever has a really good, successful season is going to look back at this draft like, if we hadn't taken that guy, we wouldn't have gotten here. Like, that's the intrigue about this draft. It's not in any way sexy with all the big names and all that, but it's I don't know. It's fascinating for a whole different reason than most NFL drafts are. And I think it's in Vegas this year, if I'm not mistaken. I think the NFL draft is in Vegas. It was supposed to be there in 2020 because the Raiders were moving there, but this COVID thing happened, so they postponed it to 2022. But no, it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing it without a question. Moving back to the NBA playoffs. The last game one of the weekend between the New Orleans Pelicans and the Phoenix Suns. Before I get into that, by the way, shout out to the New Orleans Pelicans. Beat San Antonio in their first playing game. Had to come back to beat the Clippers in the second playing game on the road. I know Paul George was out, and I said on my show on Friday, I said, with Paul George out, that's a death blow. Like, that's it for the Clippers. Like, you cannot get COVID before a playing game. Like, that's Clippers ship has sunk. But it was a great basketball game. It was back and forth, and the Pelicans pulled out with it at the end. So shout out to Willie Green, by the way, head coach of the Pelicans, who's a former assistant with the Warriors. He's built an unbelievable culture there. Like, they got off to a miserable start. I mean, if you'd have told me the New Orleans Pelicans are going to start 1-12, and by season's end, they're the 8th seed. What? Oh, and by the way, Zion's not going to play one game. I wouldn't have believed you. But that's what New Orleans did. Obviously, the trade for C.J. McCollum was massive. Brandon Ingram was great in the playing game. They had guys like a Larry Nance, who was really good in the playing game, played well last night. So if Valanciunas, this is a solid basketball team. I think the question a lot of people are asking is, does Zion play? Which, me, if a guy's been out for a year, I don't think you throw him into the playoffs. That's why I don't think this Ben Simmons nonsense in Brooklyn is going to work. It's just not. It's why the Clippers, had they made the playoffs and there'd have been the Kawhi rumors, I'd been like, no, not the playoffs. You don't throw in a guy who's been out for a year into the playoffs. But Chris Paul, man, I tell you what, I love this guy. So Chris Paul last night goes into the fourth quarter. He's got 11 points, and he finishes the game with 30. Scores 19 in the fourth quarter, and almost the Clippers. The thing about the Lob City, the Suns won the game 110-99 over the Pelicans. Again, this is a sweep. The Nuts, the Suns are much better than the Pelicans. There's no question about it. What I have always respected, and I've had in some way like kind of a soft spot, a little bit of pity for Chris Paul. Yeah, I know he makes millions of dollars and blah, blah, blah. But like in a basketball sense, I have a little bit of pity for Chris Paul. Because when you look at his career, take 2015 against the Rockets when the Clippers blew that 3-1 lead. Take that out. And you could say it's more Doc Rivers than Chris Paul because Doc Rivers is the king of blowing 3-1 leads. But take 2015 out. Chris Paul has always been a great playoff performer. Look at his days with the Pelicans. They used to be the New Orleans Hornets. Remember that first round series? They took the Lakers. I think they took them 6-7 games. The Kobe Powell Lakers. And Chris Paul was unbelievable in that series, right? And he had that run in 2014. He was great in the playoffs with the Clippers, right? And then he goes to Houston. And many argue, I don't agree, but many argue that if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt in 2018 when he's with the Rockets in the Western Conference Finals against the Warriors, that the Rockets are NBA champions that year. Instead, he gets hurt. And, of course, James Harden did his playoff thing, and the Rockets lost in the postseason. A couple years later, Chris Paul gets OKC to the playoffs and plays outstanding for the Thunder, right? Last year, in the playoffs, remember that Game 6? Remember that Western Conference Finals? Chris Paul missed the first 2 games because he had COVID, comes back, and looks like hot garbage on the 4th of July, the first from games 3 to games 5. And then in game 6, back in his old stomping grounds, in what used to be the Staples Center with the Clippers, comes to LA, drops what he dropped, 36 or something, just put the Clippers season to bed and led his team to the finals. It's always been the injury bug with him. And I can't explain it. And the injuries certainly, as he's gotten older, have come with greater regularity. But like, this is what he does in the postseason. This is why I've always said Devin Booker, while extremely valuable, I said Devin Booker, if I had an MVP vote, he'd be my number 3 over Jokic on my MVP board and my MVP voting. But I don't think Devin Booker is the most valuable player in his own team. He's the best player, but he's not the most valuable player. That's Chris Paul. Like, the Suns would be a very good basketball team without Chris Paul. They'd be a 4 or 5 seed. With him, best record in in franchise history. As a matter of fact, a stat that I saw last week that just proves the value of Chris Paul. The teams that he has played for. Take OKC out. New Orleans, the Clippers, the Rockets, and the Suns. The 4 of the 5 teams that Chris Paul has played with in his career have had the best record in franchise history when he's been there. That says it all right there. It's kind of old school. He's got the handle. We know he's got the handle. Shoots a lot of mid-range shots. He's a pretty good three-point shooter. It's not great, but he can certainly knock down a three-point shot when needed. He still, even at age 37, is he's 36, about to turn 37. Excellent defensive player. And he showed that last night against the Pelicans. Like, that's what I respect about Chris Paul. The grit, the heart, the toughness. I don't think there's anybody in the playoffs that wants to win a championship more than that guy. Seriously. Like, that guy, because he knows he's in the twilight of his career. It's coming to a close. He needs to get him some playoff wins now. And he went out there, game 1, and I think it's a precursor for what we're going to see from Chris Paul throughout this postseason. If, knock on wood, he stays healthy. Like, that's what he, outside of 2015 when they blew the 3-1 lead to Houston, that's what Chris Paul does in the postseason. He shows up and he shows out. He's just got to stay healthy. If he does, you're going to get a lot more performances like this, Phoenix Suns fans, because this guy is phenomenal in the postseason. Like I said this last year, and I'll maintain it this year. If the Suns win the championship, and certainly there's a chance they could do that, if the Suns win the championship, Chris Paul is one of the 5 greatest point guards ever. I think the list would go Magic in order. Magic, Steph, Isaiah Thomas, Stockton, Chris Paul. Actually, no, sorry. Take Stockton out, put Oscar Robertson in. Magic, Steph, Isaiah Thomas, Oscar Robertson, Chris Paul. I think Stockton's number 5 right now. Chris Paul wins the championship, he jumps him. I mean, Chris Paul never had Karl Malone. Karl Malone scored the 3rd most points in NBA history. Chris Paul never had that. He's had great scores, but he never had that. But we got a little bit of breaking news. However, to end carving it up, good news for me because it involves Rudy Gobert not winning. This says Boston. This is from Sham Sharania. Boston Celtics guard Marcus Smart has won the 2021-2022 NBA Defensive Player of the Year award. That just came in just now. So Marcus Smart is the Defensive Player of the Year. I'm good with that. I think it was the finalists. I think it was Rudy Gobert, Mikal Bridges, and Marcus Smart. Like, of those 3, I'd go with Smart. You look at perimeter defense. You look at his ability to stay with guys. He's a solid shot blocker for his size. He's incredibly, no pun intended, smart defensive player. And especially with Ime Udoka coming in and doing what he's done to the Celtics defense, Marcus Smart's been the biggest beneficiary of that. So, hey, listen, Marcus, hate that you hurt my man Steph, but I won't hold a grudge. Congratulations, Marcus Smart, your 2022 Defensive Player of the Year. All right, so with that little breaking news there, that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by. As always, be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter, right where you're watching right now. Be sure to catch the Carving Up podcast as well on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Anchor, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast. By the way, speaking of Spotify and all the podcast platforms, be sure to catch episode 2 of the Carving It Up U.S. Presidents Edition. There it is right there for the YouTube audience. We talked about Presidents 6 through 11, me and my co-host Isaac. First 2 episodes, Carving It Up U.S. Presidents Edition, are out now. You can go listen to it on our regular podcasting platforms. You can check it out on YouTube. Listen, episode 3 is going to be available on Saturday in the morning. So be sure to check out this series. Enjoy doing it so far. So be sure to check that out. Also, be sure to follow Carving It Up on social media. Instagram at Carving It Up Podcast, Twitter at Carving It Up Pod, and on Facebook, Bryson Carver. Search Bryson Carver and the Carving Up logo should pull up there. So until Thursday, hope everybody has a great week. Continue to stay safe out there. God bless you all. Peace out. Love Chris Paul. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.